Test, test, test. Okay, we're live. I don't really have any catchy phrases to start, so let's just immediately start with a review here. Like the title says, we're doing a quick review of the Spyro Trilogy that I just played on this channel. All the real gamers that watched it just know you're a real one. And we're gonna start with the final one, the third Spyro, the one that I just finished. Out of the three of them, it's also the one that, in my opinion, has the biggest amount of issues. Clearly the least polished of the three. But before we start going into the negatives, we can talk about a few of the positives that this game brought. I have a few notes here about them. The first one being the fact that all the special movement abilities are unlocked from the beginning. This was a little bit of an issue that we're gonna talk about in the second game. But in this one, all of the abilities being available from the beginning make them feel more meaningful throughout the experience, since you can actually use them for most of the game. The flying races are also a pretty neat addition. They kind of just expand a little bit on the mechanics already existing on the previous games. Flying itself has always been pretty fun, so it was pretty nice to actually race those guys, even if pretty frustrating sometimes. They were pretty fun. The final world design is actually pretty good, and I made sure to highlight this specifically because world design is actually something that's pretty bad in the third game compared to the previous two. So the final world itself, the home world, felt pretty well designed, and the worlds themselves felt better than they were in the other ones. They felt pretty distinct. They have enemy variety. They all have their own unique feel to them, unlike the rest of the worlds, which I'm gonna talk about later. Another thing that I liked, compared specifically to the second game, is the fact that the boss battles actually feel better to play with the locked-on camera. This is probably something that is fairly divisive, but in my opinion, with the type of game we're playing, it's more conducive for good gameplay to have the camera locked onto the boss. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about this when I review the Spyro 2 game, because I actually have some issues with the way the camera worked in that game in the boss battles that made them a lot more frustrating than they needed to be. And that's about it for the positives for this game. We can go now to the negatives, starting immediately with the art style. This is an issue with basically every single game in this reignited trilogy, that unfortunately the Unreal Engine that was used as a base for this game just does not work well with this type of art styles that are meant to be more whimsical and drawn like they were in the original games. This type of Unreal Engine really just, makes the characters look too realistic, sometimes even a little bit too grotesque looking, when they're supposed to be, more cute and fantastical looking like in the original games. It really doesn't translate well into the Unreal Engine. Yeah, so then all of the games suffer for it. This game in particular is probably the worst offender, I mean, the main villain is by far the ugliest out of all of them. Actually an eyesore to look at. The same with all of the mini-bosses throughout the game, they're just ugly to look at. Which I don't think was the intended, what the original game intended them to be. But yeah, all of the games have the exact same issue, so I'm not gonna fault this one more than the others. Though, overall, the character design in this game is probably the worst it's been in the series. We can start immediately with the main issue of this game. Besides, you know, the fact that it's incredibly unpolished, there's several areas on the game that clearly feel unfinished, particularly when it comes to gameplay. And it's very obvious that they ran out of time for development in this game, in terms of polish. Several problems that I'm going to talk about later in terms of gameplay. Surface, where the gameplay was simply not polished enough. But before that, we can start with the most obvious problem with this game, that is, you know, the gimmicks that it brings that, in my opinion, were not good. Spyro was just good enough of a thing when it basically was in the first game. As basic as it was, it felt good to play the game. Even with the simplistic commands and simplistic movement choices, it actually felt pretty good to play the game. Now, for these new additions, especially on the second game also does a little bit, but the third game goes extremely. They add a lot of gimmicks into the game that I'm really not a fan of. And we can start with the multiple playable characters that the game decides to add. We start immediately with the kangaroo. The kangaroo, maybe you can feel like it's a little bit interesting to control a different character with different mobility options. After you've played with Spyro for so long, and that's true to an extent, however, unlike Spyro, none of the characters have actually their movements as polished. Especially with the ones introduced in 3, as I've already said, 3 is by far the least polished game in the series. So for all of them to be introduced in the final game, obviously led to their movements being less polished than Spyro by far. Maybe if they were introduced earlier, they would have been a little bit better off, but whatever. With the kangaroo itself, it may start fun initially, but it gets tiring very quickly. The kangaroo moves extremely slowly. You usually try to force movement speed by jumping, which is kind of the intuition as a gamer that you have. By jumping you move faster. Unfortunately for you, it doesn't move any faster. In fact, you move slower by jumping around. The whole mechanic of double jumps is interesting at first, but afterwards it starts becoming annoying because you start hitting double jumps and you don't want to hit the double jumps. It becomes pretty annoying to play with. The kangaroo moving extremely slowly, it just is not conducive to any fun mechanics. And just like basically every other one of the new playable characters, as a gimmick, you're very limited in what you're actually able to do with the characters. So after a while it gets old very quickly. You basically have 3 movement options with them, unlike Spyro, where you have a lot more options to move around. So it gets old very fast. At the very least, they, instead of making you play with a kangaroo throughout the game, they decide to go ahead and add other characters to kind of take off the boredom of it. But to be honest, in my opinion, it probably was better to just add one new playable character, focus very deeply on their movements and their mechanics, and actually make a good playable character, and just start, you know, distributing multiple playable characters that and end up with like 4 or 5 characters that all feel unpolished and unfinished and end up getting very tiring to play as at the end. We can the penguin is the next one, and it's probably the most fun to use, probably the only one I actually had fun using most of the time. The fly mechanic is actually very nice, being able to fly around like that, throwing bombs at your enemies. It's actually pretty fun. I mean, the levels of the penguin, you being, you know, in levels that are very enclosed, does take a little bit away from the penguin. I remember very well that one of the first levels that you play as, you have a flying ability where you're basically constrained in an extremely enclosed space, so it kind of takes the fun a little bit away. If you're gonna make a flying character, let him go around and fly in open spaces. They will fix it in another level. The second or third level use the penguin that they basically let you free to roam in a very open scenario, and that's where the penguin really shines. Probably the most, probably definitely the most fun out of all of the new additions, to be honest. After the penguin we go downhill again with the Bigfoot. The Bigfoot, out of all of them, is probably the worst of the playable characters. Just like the kangaroo, it's extremely slow, and it's definitely the least polished of the four. You basically have three movement options, and that's it. You have the analog stick to move, at an extremely slow pace, mind you. You have the action button to hit and break stuff, and you have the special button that makes you reflect certain things your enemies throw at you for certain specific objectives. Well, yeah, the special reflect option is basically rarely used. It's only really used when the game decides to make a roadblock for you. It's not really implemented, ingrained into the character, which is again one of the reasons why this game feels, all of these characters feel unpolished, because they really just have abilities specifically for roadblocks, not really, constructed as, ingrained into the character itself, just to make you able to deal with certain roadblocks. But the special build itself, it's very poorly designed in my opinion, because the way it works, it's not really. It would probably be better for me to show it, but I don't really have any patience to open up the third game to open an example of that. But it's not well programmed, because first of all, you don't even need to really hit the throw of all objects exactly at the right angle for you to throw them back, which, okay, and I feel like that was really just a compromise because of how bad the mobility of the characters are. It's almost impossible to basically be accurate with the aiming with that stuff, so that's basically why they compromised and made it so they have a massive range. For that, you basically are able to catch throwable objects that are not even close to you, and you throw them back mostly to the right position. But even with that, just positioning yourself well enough, rotating your character in the specific into the specific angle that you need to throw the object back is really bad, and it's really a good thing that they barely use that mechanic, because if they had used it more and applied it to more complex situations, you would really hate doing that, because the mobility, the angling of the character is just terrible. It's really bad, and it's not. And the club attack that the Yeti uses is also not well programmed either. I don't think they really managed quite to make what they were trying to do with the Yeti. What I'm assuming they were trying to do is make a character that has a higher attack range, which they did. The Yeti does have a slightly higher attack range. The thing is that attack range is shorter than Spyro's flame, obviously, way shorter actually, and it's so short that whenever you're trying to go ahead and hit an enemy, the club, by the time you're basically able to smash the club into an enemy, the enemy has already hit you, so you're not able to go ahead and hit the club first. Now again, to fix this, they once again went in a direction that is not a good one, in which they basically allowed you to hit your enemies without the club touching them. So imagine the club would be there, but the range of the club, the damage of the club would basically go all the way up here, which is not very conducive to, it's not something, first of all, that you would understand. You would expect the club to basically do damage when it hits, not have a range like that. And I think that's just, again, another way they used to hide the poor programming and the lack of polish in this game. They basically just put a tape on it and allowed you to hit further than you were supposed to, because otherwise it would be impossible to beat enemies and you would be constantly dying, because basically every enemy hits not only faster than you, but hits you first because your range is just not enough. So they basically put a band-aid on that. Overall, it's the worst design character overall. It's also, I already mentioned before, but extremely slow, which is an issue with basically every single one of these. All of them end up feeling slow, because unlike Spyro, none of them have the dash option. And with the Yeti and the Kangaroo themselves, it's especially obvious, considering that movement speed is extremely low. With the next one, the Monkey, the final one, it's the second best one. Not exactly good, but I'd say out of all of them, it's probably the best. Not named Penguin, obviously. You basically, because it's a shooter, basically allowed to go around shooting, which is kind of already a mechanic in this game, though it's a little bit different with the Monkey, different enough to feel different. Its movement options are also very limited, but I'd say the variance that you get from being able to shoot and position yourself actually makes the Monkey a little bit better than the other two. The Monkey also has higher movement speed, which makes him a lot less of a hassle to use, so you don't get tired as quickly of using him. I still wish all of them had dashes. Unfortunately they don't, which makes retracking and redoing levels extremely annoying. But yeah, the Monkey is probably the second best. Not exactly great, but it's acceptable, I'd say. There's also the fifth one, which only appears in the races. That is Hunter, and I mean, it's a mess, to be honest. Every time Hunter has a spaceship, it's horrible to control spaceships in this game, and Hunter does have one or two missions in which you have to use a spaceship with them. It's just not good. The missions where you use Hunter himself flying around with the cape are okay. I do think though that Hunter moves a little bit too fast for his missions. Sometimes when you're doing pursuing missions, Hunter ends up moving a little bit too fast, and you end up losing memorize the entire tracks. I guess it's the objective of this game, but in my opinion, Hunter moves too fast and doesn't turn enough. That's the difficulty of the levels, but it doesn't make it any less annoying to have to deal with. I mean, Spyro himself already has issues with turning in flying levels. Hunter just makes it even worse. Then, outside of the characters, there's a few other types of gimmicks that the game really brings. One of the most infamous ones are the skateboard levels, which are absolutely terrible. Controlling just the basic turning is really bad. It's not polished in the slightest. It either turns too much, turns too little. Doing the tricks is also horrible because it's really bad. Controlling the skateboard up in the air while trying to do tricks. A lot of times you end up just turning yourself into completely incomprehensible angles and just burying your face in a wall, falling off the map, because it's just not. You have to imagine you have ramps set up in a way that they jump you to a curve, to where you have to turn, but you also want to do one of the special moves. So you end up, instead of using your joystick to the left or the right to turn, or just up and down to do the tricks, you end up moving the joystick into the diagonal because you want to do both at once, and you end up just angling your skateboard in a way that you cannot recover it, basically. I'm pretty sure it gets a little bit better after you do the dragonfly missions. You gain more air control, but forget it. If you're trying to do that base without any of the dragonfly missions, as soon as you angle your skateboard wrongly, it's over for you. You're gonna crash. You have absolutely no control over air control, really. Sometimes you end up, you're doing one of the tricks and you end up a little bit too forward or a little bit too to the side, and you want to revert back to prevent your skateboard from crashing. The game doesn't allow you to. You can only go forward. I mean, you can't re-angle yourself to prevent yourself from crashing. So basically, it's over for you there. Races themselves are not exactly fun. I do like that you can crash into your opponents. That's fun. Throw them explosives. But to be honest, I would rather them just not have the special tricks. Just keep it to boosters that you can get throughout the map, rather than doing any sorts of tricks to gain boost levels. Just have the regular boost items on the map that you can get, because again, the game is just not complex enough and well programmed enough to really warrant that sort of complex movement from the tricks. It ends up just feeling wrong. It's another gimmick that just doesn't work, and you have to do it so much it gets really annoying after a while. The races themselves are actually not easy, especially the first place guy is usually very fast. So for you to get him, you basically have to not crash once, which again, if you try, you start in last place, so you have to make up a lot of places. And if you want to make up a lot of places, you need to gain the booster. And if you want to gain the booster, you need to risk it a lot with tricks. And if you're doing tricks, you're very likely gonna crash because the skateboard starts angling itself in the wrong way, or you end up doing a trick and end up spinning Spyro too much, and you have no way of recovery because you have no time to do another spin, and you are unable to rotate Spyro slightly to save yourself, so you end up crashing, and multiple times you end up losing because of that. The circuits themselves are also not really well done. I don't think the hoverboard is actually really slow baseline without any boosts. Overall, I don't think it's a well-made mechanic. I think it's just bad. I mean, I feel like it could just be removed, honestly. Replace it with regular levels. Overall, in terms of home worlds, Spyro 3 is also worse than the others. I don't think the home worlds are as well constructed. They're not as memorable. I mean, having a home world that is half below the water is certainly a choice that I don't approve of, to be honest. But home worlds are definitely not as well made. They're not as open. They're a lot closed. A lot of them are very much closed. I don't think, especially compared to the second game, which had the second home world was incredible. Incredible home worlds. The third one really fails at that, with the exception of the final one that I already mentioned. Compared to the previous two games, the third one also has terrible enemy variety. You basically fight a variation of the rhinoceros enemies in basically every single level. The same enemies over and over and over again. That is not a thing in the first or second games, by the way. You have, in the second game, I think it goes too far on enemy variety. Every single new portal is a new enemy, which I'm gonna talk about it later, but you basically have the same enemy variety. In the first one, it's not as extreme, but you basically have enemy variation between every home world. You don't have the same enemy type of Rhinox in every single world. You have enemy variety, basically, based on home worlds, really, that they go around changing. In the third one, you have the same Rhinox from the beginning to the end. Not exactly the end, as I already mentioned. In the final worlds, you do finally get enemy variety, and I feel like they're some of the best constructed worlds, in my opinion. Because one thing that they do is, instead of just using regular enemies like in the second game, they go around and throw some more mystical creatures at you, which I prefer. Unfortunately, that was only done in the end of the tail end of the game. For the most of the game, you're just fighting the same enemies over and over and over again. which obviously is not exactly very fun. It gets old after a while. And then there's some nitpicks that I also have throughout the game, particularly the poison areas, which are honestly very annoying in games like this, where you basically are not able to save yourself. Particularly, there's one special area, the special areas that use the protection power-up are particularly annoying to me, because there's one level in particular you had to go around submerging yourself in acid, and you have to continuously refuel the protection power-up, which is extremely annoying. It really is anti-exploration, real, and the worst part, you're forced to explore if you want to get the gems or the eggs hidden around it. It's really annoying. Like there was one of the special portals where you had to go around, move for 15 meters, and go back. Otherwise, you run out of protection power and die in the acid. That's really annoying. I don't know why exactly they even thought it was a good idea. It's not fun in the slightest. I guess it's a little bit more of a nitpick from my side. Another thing that this game does is that the levels are clearly a lot bigger and a lot larger than the levels in the previous games. They definitely take a lot longer. I mean, forget the first game, even compared to the second one, these levels feel extremely long. Sometimes you're like 6 eggs to collect. In most of them you actually have 6 eggs to collect. That is a lot. Now granted, yes, a lot of them are just from exploring the level hidden around. Yes, though I don't think level design is quite as good as it was in the first game, so exploration is a little bit more annoying. They go back to this game goes back to the way the first game worked though. Most of the eggs are just hidden around the level, forcing you to explore the level, unlike in the second, which they are hidden behind minigames. Though this game does both, to be honest, it does kind of both, because unlike the minigames of the second level, this one decides to change it a little bit by making the portals. They're not exactly a minigame with a character with a question mark asking you to do a quest for them, for you to get the egg, but you still need to do the quest. It's just not behind an NPC with a quest marker. You still need to do it anyway. So you kind of still have that, which in my opinion is not exactly. I mean, it may seem fun at the beginning, but I feel like it goes against what Spyro is supposed to be. But still, yeah, this kind of combines both, where you have like 4 eggs, which are from exploration, and 2 eggs, which are from quests and special objectives that you have to do. Now, yes, this game, I don't think the levels are as well constructed as the first one, so exploration is not good, but overall I'd say it's a positive that you hide the levels around like that. I don't think the hidden areas are as well constructed. I think the levels are not as seamless, in my opinion. Sometimes you go around and around and around at the same level. It just feels a little bit clunky and bloated, the levels, in my opinion, compared to the first game, which I feel like did the best when it came to this. Simple levels, but with some nice secrets that you had to really bash your head against the wall to find out. I mostly didn't find out because I gave up halfway through and wait to find out the solution online, but yeah, you're supposed to find out. In this game though, they also continue the whole thing about introducing breakable walls that are almost invisible to anyone, which again I don't think is exactly a good way of hiding things behind if you're gonna go around and hide one special breakable wall for you to get through. That's still annoying. That's a relic from the second game that I'm gonna criticize in that one and not in this one. But overall, exploring levels is not as fun as in the first game, but it's better than the second one, because in this one you're actually incentivized to explore. Well, and the challenges themselves, once again, continue with the gimmicks, playing around with submarines, using spaceships. It's the same as before. It's not exactly the most fun thing in the world. It starts getting tiring after a while, because there's not even that many different minigames anyway, so again, I don't even think there was any need for that. Just create more levels with more hidden eggs. Then, speaking of minigames, the tank minigame was actually really bad. And I can also just lump in the Dragonfly minigames. They basically work exactly the same way with the controls. The Dragonfly one was even worse, to be honest. The tank was slow again, it was clunky, moving it was really annoying. To beat those levels you basically had to just slowly but surely skirt around the corners and hit your enemies. That's basically what you had to do. I mean, thankfully you only really had one example with the tank, and after you got the controls more or less unlocked, it was not as annoying. Still, it was not exactly fun either. The Dragonfly minigames, however, are basically the tanks, but even worse, because unlike the tanks, which basically only really involve you straightening out your tank into where your enemy is and just dancing around it, dodging their shots and just spamming your shots, the Dragonfly you kind of have to do the same, but unlike in the other one, your controls are kind of like 8-dimensional. You have 8 dimensions. You have front, back, left, right, and then you have the angular ones. You have front, left, together, front, right, together, back, left, together, back, right, together. And yes, you do have ways to basically move Dragonfly locked down, because otherwise you'd be absolutely unbearable to play this game. You have ways to lock down. Imagine if you want to move horizontally, you can. Without rotating, you just want to move on, you can do that. But there are times where you need to shoot diagonally, and the lockdown version for moving, for keeping yourself pointing in a certain direction and just moving over across that axis doesn't work. For the either doesn't work or doesn't work well, because I actually tried a bunch of times and failed multiple times to do it. So whenever there were enemies diagonally, I ended up getting completely screwed, because I really had no way of doing it. I had to basically force the kill by going in, spamming a little bit and trying to get rid of them, and taking a bunch of damage in the process. So the diagonal controls are not good, and it's just another minigame that just shows how much of those little gimmicks this game decided to introduce for no reason. None of them are really explored or given enough depth to really justify their inclusion. Just feeling half-fast, like everything in this game just feels half-fast. The playable characters feel half-fast, the gimmicks feel half-fast, everything feels half-fast, which again, I'm pretty sure that this happened because they were behind on schedule and had to force the game out. But I mean, that's not really an excuse for the visit, that's just a justification. And well, yeah, the final fight was also terrible, to be honest. Literally the easiest of the boss battles. The boss battles themselves were not exactly great. They were not, though. None of the boss fights in this game are actually that good. Maybe besides the boss fight against Nasty and Orc in the first game. But overall, they're not exactly fun. In the first game, they were really easy, too easy. In the second game, they actually get pretty hard, especially the second boss fight. Especially since you actually have I'll talk about it later. I'm getting ahead of myself here. In this one, the first boss battle was the hardest by far, and then they got progressively easier. And the final boss was literally a joke without how easy it was. And the final boss is exactly where you know that they did not have time to finish the game, because it's just you can see that there's clear problems in the boss battle. You have clear issues of movement ability, especially the spaceships. They don't move well. You have scenarios in which you would go around and just hit and crash into where there was nothing really to crash into, like there was a field around the boss. In that case, you're not even hitting the crocodile sorceress, and there was kind of like an invisible wall around. In this battle is really the one you can clearly tell how fast this game is. Everything about it was how fast. It was too easy. It was not programmed correctly. It was clunky as hell, especially the spaceships. I mean, it was just bad. It was terrible, especially compared to the one in the second game, which again, I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan overall of any of these flying fights. But at the very least, it was well programmed. This one was not. And well, I think that's about it, really. The story is what you'd expect of a game like this. I guess there's nothing good, nothing bad to say, really. I guess the villain was the least interesting of the three, since you basically, not only do you basically not interact with the villain at all throughout most of the game, leaving basically a really small attachment to her, like it happened in the second game, where the villain was constantly in your face throughout the entire game. Nor does it really feel like the villain is this unsurmountable wall that you need to overcome, like Nasty North, because I mean, what did the villain do in this game? She told one rabbit to go steal some eggs, and that's basically an whole plan. That doesn't really sound very menacing now, does it? Like, compared it to Nasty North in the first game, who got pissed watching the dragons badmouth and just froze all of them into statues. Like, how is that even comparable? There's really no stakes, and unlike in the second game where the stakes were lower as well, the villain was more in your face, making that presence felt. So it basically fails on both accounts. Also, the design is the worst of the three. It looks uncanny as hell, man. It looks clearly Unreal Engine 3. That's the definition of Unreal Engine. That's a realistic-esque aesthetic that just doesn't suit Spyro in the slightest. And I'd say that's about it for the third game. Clearly the worst of the trilogy, in my opinion. Overall, just unfinished, unpolished, too gimmicky. Overall, I'd say it's definitely the worst, and I think it did a disservice to the original games. And I'm gonna rate it, I'd say, kind of, it's either like a 7 or a 6.5. I mean, if we're being objective here, it's a 6.5 probably. But I'm gonna be a little bit generous and give it... Nah, I'm not gonna be generous, it's a 6.5. Spyro 3 Remastered. Now we're gonna start going backwards. The reviews are gonna start getting shorter and shorter now, since again, neither of the first two games have as many problems as the third one. They're also a little bit better, so there's not as much to talk about, especially in the first one, but we'll get there when you get there. Spyro 2 manages to be a good sequel, I'd say, to the first one. It's still fun to play. One change that happened in this game compared to the first one, and it was kept for Spyro 3, is actually the homeworlds not having any enemies. Because in Spyro 1, the homeworlds are kind of already used as one of the gate worlds, so you have enemies to fight. In this one, there's no enemies in the homeworlds, which I actually like. I'm not gonna say if it's better or worse. I like the difference. I like that you're basically able to relax once you get out of a portal, instead of being bombarded with enemies that you already killed and having to kill them again or just ignoring them. It's kind of ends up becoming a little bit clustered after a while. End up getting tired of seeing their faces. I remember in the first game, in the one where you have the guys dressed as French soldiers, I started getting really tired of their shenanigans after a while. Every time I visited the level, I had to deal with them. I do actually like not having to deal with any enemies in the whole worlds. It also made the whole worlds a little bit more memorable, ironically, because you were able to just walk around, relax, take in the visage. It was pretty fun overall. Well, I already touched on this before, but yeah, this game has an extreme amount of enemy variety. Like every single level you enter, there's a different type of enemy. Not just one, there's 2, 3 new enemy types in every single new level. It's insane. Like the gameplay never really gets stale because of that. You have a lot of enemy variety, constantly changing up the gameplay loop and how to deal with the enemies. Some are annoying, yes, but overall it's very good. This is clearly an issue in the second game. The third game. In the first one, I never really thought it was an issue, but when you get to Spyro 2, you get overwhelmed with how many enemies there are. You really never stop. And there's a bit of a downside to this that I'm gonna mention a little bit later, but not for now. For now, yes, this is a good thing. Enemy variety is always a good thing. Now, not exactly always, because when you add so much enemy variety, the enemies end up becoming less inspired and having less complex movement patterns, yes. But I don't really think that was the case in Spyro 2. I think they were actually pretty ambitious in what they did. So yeah, I'd say it's a very good thing. Some of the new power-ups were decently fun, I'd say. Again, I'm not a big fan of the power-ups in general, precisely because I always felt like the first game really managed to succeed, despite how simplistic the gameplay was. He really only had one power-up in that game, that was the speed boost, and yet the gameplay did not feel boring in the slightest. I feel like adding these power-ups, okay, it changes the gameplay, but at the same time it goes a little bit against what Spyro was in essence, succeeding with simplicity. In this game, however, I think they're fairly inoffensive. I mean, the sections with flying, the flying sections that this game introduced are always a pain, because I already said that Spyro himself doesn't have the best controls on the air. He actually doesn't turn very well, which is okay for the air events, the flying events specifically. Now, for the specific tasks that you're given in these games, where you have to go ahead and fly within levels to hit a certain amount of enemies, Spyro being bad to control on the air is actually terrible. It feels horrible to control in those challenges, because those challenges actually require very precise inputs. In the flying levels, you don't really need precise inputs. You mostly just need to memorize the way to go and just do it. There's not really a lot. There's some areas which are a little bit more tight, and yes, you need to prepare yourself previously, but there's no need for very specific, very focused inputs. Now, for the levels though, for the mini games that you have within certain levels, I remember specifically the one where you have to hit a bunch of spiders in an icy level. Then it becomes a problem, Spyro not being good to control in the air, because you need those very small inputs to basically move Spyro just enough to not get him off course. And Spyro doesn't work that way. He's basically like a car with understeer. He doesn't move a lot, and you have to go ahead and make very sharp turns. You're not going to be able to do it. And it's not like in the flying levels where you have a lot of space, open space, to open up your corners and do the movement. No, in those places you have basically a spider right after, but you don't have any space or time to open up your corners. Also, again, Spyro being not exactly great to control in the air is made even worse. It wasn't really an issue in the flying levels, but once you start having to go around flying within enclosed spaces through caves, for instance, it starts becoming an issue, because this is I'm gonna mention this again later in the problems, but flying itself has one core issue that's been here since the first game, that makes this even worse. And again, when you're entering close spaces with tight and you need tight corners and very specific inputs, it becomes a real issue very fast. And okay, the boss battles. The boss battles were, I'd say, an issue of the first game. This game managed to make them a little bit more challenging. I'd say they got a little bit too challenging, not exactly too challenging, but too challenging. The reason I say too challenging is because you actually have objectives in this game to beat the boss battles with taking no damage. Beating the boss is actually not very hard, but beating them with taking no damage is actually extremely hard, especially the second one. Actually insanely difficult to beat that one, and this is because of one of the issues in this game that I'm gonna mention later. But overall, yes, the boss battles being a little bit more intricate was good. They were intricate enough, though they were intricate enough to feel new. Though yes, they did end up rehashing the fighting methods really from the second and the third. Though the final fight is a little bit better built than the second one, because of the way you use it, but that's really the same way. It wasn't really, I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's always about, you know, throwing some random throwable object at the boss until you beat them. It's the same for the second and third. It doesn't really feel any different than the second phase of well, I'll focus on it later when I get to the bed. I'm gonna start going to the problems with this game right now. And yeah, this is an issue that actually exists. Actually, I did note here something about the dash. I actually feel like that was my issue, my skill issue in that case, because I actually didn't know that you can actually just dash forward just by clicking square. I thought you had to be pressing your joystick forward as well. So controlling Spyro was actually really hard because of that, because I was constantly having to slow inputs, small inputs, because I was trying to keep the joystick forward while turning. So that actually made the dashing movements a lot harder than they needed to be, because when you can actually just press square and it starts dashing forward. It's actually an issue I had with the first game as well, which I'm gonna have to remove because it's my skill issue. But yeah, you can just press square and then just move the joystick left and right for him to move, and he moves so much better, it's insane. You're able to go ahead and make sharp turns a lot better. So yeah, this is actually not an issue with the game, it's just me being a dumbass. Well, yeah, this game introduces underwater levels, and you probably already noticed from the way I spoke about underwater stuff. In the third game, I don't like them. I mean, I don't think there's a single game that really made underwater levels good. It's always annoying. I mean, I remember playing Mario games, and whenever the underwater level came, it was always an annoyance to get through. It's not much better here. The controls are annoying underwater. The dash underwater is actually an issue, because the dash underwater actually adds a third dimension to the dash. You actually have to go ahead and dictate the height, the angle of your height, if you're moving up and down on the water, and that actually makes moving underwater really annoying. Actually, you're constantly having to adjust the direction you're going towards whenever you're breaking down gems down there. It's not fun in the slightest. Overall, yeah, I mean, it's underwater levels. What else can you expect? I do think there was a bit too much underwater levels. Again, they're not fun. I mean, okay, one or two. I think there was too many underwater levels. And yeah, I actually mentioned this as a positive, and in the third game, that is the movement mechanics in this game are actually locked behind certain story parts. You have to buy them from the trader, which, by the way, what an annoying guy. One of the best parts of the third game was being able to beat his ass for basically extorting you throughout the second and third games. Thankfully, you're actually allowed to beat his ass and get all the gems back. Actually, very nice touch from the third game. Definitely made me smile a little bit. But yeah, you have to buy them from the trader, and some of them are they just come so late into the game. It's actually crazy. The head rush, you used the head rush like twice, because you only really get it in the final homeworld, and you have like 2 levels before that, where you actually need to use. You have the specific area to head rush to open the crate. You use it twice the whole game. You get it like right before the final battle. Like, what was the point of introducing that in the first place then? Why would you introduce it if you're just gonna go ahead and lock it to the end of the game and just use it in 2 levels? Why not just unlock them all from the beginning? What was the point? It's not as if these special movements are conducive to, you know, more interesting gameplay. Yeah, you get a better option to kill enemies, but it's not as if you're going around making the gameplay more complex. I mean, it's just better to bash them or flame them anyway. You're not going to use them on enemies unless it's the specific enemy type created to force you to use this mechanic. Unless it's that, you're not going to use this anyway. So why exactly lock this away until the end? I don't understand. This game also introduced another mechanic, that was the climbing, which, I mean, the climbing was once again introduced late, though this one was actually used more, since you actually get it, I'm pretty sure, at the end of the first homeworld, after beating the first boss there. The thing is though, just why exactly do we need to climb ladders in Spyro? Why? It's slow, it's a bit clunky, it's annoying to do, and it just replaces parkour, which was already a core part of Spyro's identity. You just replace parkour with climbing a ladder vertically. What was the thought process here? I don't think it was a good idea to add this. They should have been removed and replaced with parkour sections. Yeah, another bad point. I already mentioned it before, but yeah, Spyro being stiff flying is an issue. Not exactly in the flying levels, but in the specific tasks that force you to get the flying power up in the middle of a level and do very tight corners, require very specific inputs. That is just not good gameplay in the slightest. But this was already more or less explored before. One issue, I'm actually going to continue that thought process about the enemy variety. The issue I have with the enemy variety in this game is that, unlike in the first one, the enemies were actually very forgettable. Even the bosses were somewhat forgettable. Ripto was actually fine. I think it was a good change of pace from the, you know, humongous and kind of intimidating Nasty Nork. You now get a little bit of a smaller guy that runs his mouth, sends his goons after you. That doesn't really feel physically intimidating. It's kind of a good change of pace from Nasty Nork, who doesn't speak and is just intimidating overall. But I mean, his goons are pretty okay, I guess, but not even that different from each other. They're not decent. The main issue though is in the worlds, the portal worlds themselves, the enemy types that you find are just animals, which is actually something I dislike. I mean, in the first game, your enemies are not animals. They're random, whimsical creatures, fantastical creatures. I mean, yes, you have some animals, but most of the enemies are actually not just a dog, just a bird, just a tiger, a lion. That's not how it works in the first game. In the second one, I feel like character design got a bit lazy. It definitely makes the enemies far less memorable, in my opinion. They don't really stick out though. Enemies are all, I mean, the design itself is always scuffed because of the Unreal Engine. It just makes them ugly. I mean, just remember, the seal from the third game is actually a nightmare. What a disgusting thing, man. That is so bad. But this is why using Unreal Engine in a game like Spyro, it's just... What were they thinking, man? What were they thinking? Well, whatever. But yeah, the enemy variety is good. However, the enemy designs are not good, I don't think. They're just animals made into enemies. I mean, could you not be a little bit more imaginative? Really? I mean, maybe they're actually better without the Unreal Engine. Maybe they're not just animals. Maybe they have some more fantastical traits which you just remove in the Unreal Engine, because it is the Unreal Engine. This makes everything more realistic, I guess. Then yeah, besides that, there's also the tasks in this game, unlike in the first one where you basically got your collectibles, in this case dragons and eggs. It's actually funny that the third game came back with the collectibles from the second game, from the first game. In the third game your collectibles are not eggs, nor dragons, they're power stones. But yeah, in the second game, the quests that you have, to be honest, I'm not exactly a big fan of the system, because he actually starts, it's where Spyro starts becoming a bit too gimmicky, in my opinion. I also feel like this one, the portal worlds are actually the ones with the worst design, because in this game they were not created specifically to induce fun exploration of the level. In fact, you barely explore, since most of the collectibles, in this case the power orbs, are actually gotten through the quests. You have to do the quests to get the orbs, so the levels are actually not very good in this one. It's actually the worst out of the three games, which makes it's an issue for exploration, I feel like. And again, it's where the gimmicks start with Spyro, which get old a little bit fast, in my opinion. Specifically the ones that involve flying, those are just not fun in the slightest. And then another issue I have, I think it's more obvious in this game than the other one, that in this game you actually have a few parkours that you actually start to notice that there's actually, you don't actually quite touch things. There's basically kind of like a barrier around every object and around Spyro that, I mean, most of the time it's invisible, you don't really feel it. But when you're going around flying, doing parkours that require precise movement, you actually clearly feel that barrier, because Spyro he's not touching whatever object you're flying on the pillar, for example, but the game counts it as Spyro hitting the pillar. And this is actually really annoying in certain parkour sections that you because while you're flying, if you basically brush, I don't know, I think it depends on where you brush it. If you brush it on the side, Spyro's gliding is cancelled and you fall down. I remember a specific level where there was this specific parkour I had to do, and I was constantly brushing the side, and the parkour was, the gliding was constantly being cancelled. But the thing is, I was not touching the side, but the game assumed I was, because the invisible barriers around Spyro and the objects that extend outwards were actually touching each other, so the game assumed that I was touching and cancelled my glide. And again, for it's not a problem for regular parkour, but for precise parkour that requires moving around pillars and objects, it's actually really bad. Again, it doesn't come up a lot. I remember being very frustrated with that in a specific level. But it doesn't come up anymore, because again, they replaced parkour with ladders in a lot of situations. And there's not really as much parkour as there was in the first game. But it's still an issue. I mean, just because it doesn't come up very often, doesn't mean I'm not gonna mention it. And then there's two more problems, I would say, I have with this game. and those would be, yeah, of course, breaking walls. In this game, it's actually even worse than in the third game, because at least in the third game, you already have the context that you know that there's walls that can be broken, so you're always on the lookout for them. In this game, from what I remember, there is absolutely no setup for the whole breaking walls business. So I was basically running around aimless, trying to find the missing gems and the missing eggs from the second overworld in this game, and I had no clue where exactly it was. Well, the reason for that was because they were hidden behind walls that could be broken. You had to break the wall to open the path behind and get to the gems and to the eggs. But the thing is, I don't think there was anything ever explaining that you could actually break walls. I don't think it was set up in the slightest. Maybe you were supposed to move forward, get the head bash and understand that you could actually break rocks, but even then, I mean, I only got the idea to head bash rocks, which funnily enough, another egg was in the final world. You had to head bash rocks to destroy them, and inside were gems and eggs. Though in the third one, maybe you could kind of deduce it, because with the ability of the dragonfly to point towards the nearest gem, eventually the dragonfly will start pointing at rocks and you might try to break them. But even after that, I don't think he would really make the connection that, okay, I can break rocks, that means I can break walls, because the rocks are kind of just a different type of entity. They feel like they are another, not really part of the world generation itself, whereas the walls feel like part of the world. So I don't even feel like that would be enough for you to make the connection. You have to break the walls of the castle to get the last gems or the last eggs. Again, I don't think it only happened in those specific situations, but come on, man, at least fucking use it in a level that you break down a wall or something. Maybe like right at the beginning you have to go through a level where you have to break something. Like, why exactly are you not telling the player that you can break down walls? It's not even pointing that direction, that yes, consistently pointing that direction is bad. It's actually a thing that I forgot to mention. The third game is that the third game starts holding your hand a lot. One thing that made the flying levels, I mean, they were frustrating, yes, but when you get it right, it was satisfying. It was like the fact that you had to find the correct order of objects that you had to deal with. I mean, I actually had to try over and over and over again several times until I actually got the order correctly. In the third game, they actually just straight up tell you the order you have to follow, which basically made those levels a joke of how easy they were. They were extremely easy to get through. In the second and first game, you actually are not told. You have to bash your head against the wall until you find the solution. I think it's fine that way. I mean, them just telling you. I mean, overall, I feel like the fly levels were actually really made too easy in the third game. But yeah, I mean, this is a different scenario though. You don't even know that you're able to break walls. Again, if you pass by them, it's just gonna assume it's part of the world generation. It's part of the map. You're not supposed to break that. It's impossible to break. Because why in the world would it be possible to break down the wall? But I feel like they should have just shown you that there's some walls that you can break. And that's a negative for this game. Again, it's not a massive negative since it doesn't happen a lot, but yeah, it's still bad. And then finally, the last problem I have with the game that I noted over here, maybe there's more that I'm not remembering from my notes. The final issue I have with this game was the second and third boss battles, particularly the second, and not just because it's too hard to get the special point for not taking any damage in the battle. I mean, after you finish the game, you can retry the fight again with the infinite flame ball power, and then it becomes painfully easy. Because again, it's kind of weird. they made the base fight, when you fight that boss for the first time, really hard to do without taking any damage. And then they made it so that you actually have an extremely easy way of beating him afterwards, so it's basically 1 out of 100. You don't have a decent challenge, something in the middle, but it's, you know, possible. I know it's possible to do it without the bomb, but it's actually extremely difficult. Like, the guy fires balls that are extremely precise. That's not even the main issue. The main issue is that if you try to dodge the balls, the method of fighting that guy, you have to go ahead, dash forward, and hit explosives, which will then fly towards the boss's face and do damage. But the thing is, angling Spyro, as you can see here, is actually really difficult for you to angle Spyro, because again, Spyro also moves. If you're trying to angle him, he also kind of moves in a 8-dimensional artwork. You have left, you have the diagonal, you have front, you have the diagonal over here, you have left, diagonal, and back. It kind of moves on 8, which again makes very precise movements. Very hard. I mean, it's not an issue when you're when you're moving around. It doesn't feel like an issue because you actually have full mobility. But when you're stopped like this, and you try to angle yourself to do the dash, and you actually have to move yourself like this for that boss battle. You cannot just move around like this, because you need to position yourself in a way where you have a straight line for the object. Position yourself like that. I mean, position yourself in line with the object already are. Position yourself in line with the object, and making it aim specifically at the boss is actually really hard. Because again, the game was not meant. The controls were not meant for those precise inputs. It's actually extremely difficult to do, especially when you're under constant bombardment by the boss's lasers, which are basically, unless you're actively dodging them, you're gonna get hit, since they're basically impossible to dodge or run away from them. You basically have to do a very precise motion of running around, more or less in place, to dodge them. Which makes the battle just, I mean, I'm not gonna say clunky, but I mean, it's kind of clunky. This method was clearly not meant for a game like this, specifically under the pressure that you're in the boss battle. And then it becomes, I mean, once you get the power ability, just spend 10 fireballs and you kill the guy. So, I mean, you either have a fight that is basically almost impossible. Not because it's hard, but because it's just, I mean, it's somewhat hard, yes, but the issue is the mobility of Spyro and the method that they chose to do damage to him. This kind of also happened in the final one, but I think it's a bit better, since in the final one you actually don't have to ram stuff into the boss. You actually have to spit stuff out, which is a bit easier to control, because in that one you actually can just use the continuous movement that gives you 360 mobility. The issue that is actually a problem in both of them is the way that these elements that you have to use to do damage to the bosses spawn. They're thrown from the sky at random intervals. And this is why I said that in the third game I actually like the camera being fixed, because a lot of times the elements are dropped behind you. And again, when you're on Spyro, in the arena, there's actually a complete blind spot. They obviously never gonna watch, because you're focused on the boss. So if the thing drops down back there, you're never even gonna be able to know that it's there. You're gonna have to continuously run around, and sometimes you're never even gonna see it, because at the edge of the arena you never quite get that far. That thing is always on your blind spot, so you never even know that thing dropped. And I don't think that's exactly a good design, especially since moving the camera around is actually not good in this game. It's not good in the slightest. It actually gets really tricky controlling Spyro like that. And again, you're in the middle of a boss battle. You have to pay attention to the other guy, to the boss, I mean, especially if you try to get a fight again. And the main issue here is that yes, they force you to do the fight without taking damage. But if you're gonna do that, I mean, you're gonna have to be much more precise. You're gonna need the gameplay to be much more streamlined and polished for that to be the case. If you're gonna force players to actually get that, and to actually do that to get the win. So with the camera like that, a lot of times you end up missing the stuff that is behind, and sometimes the boss just straight up runs towards it and gets it instead of you, which is extremely annoying, especially in the second fight when the boss runs straight to a sheep that fell down behind you and recovers health that was already extremely hard to get down. And well, that's about it for my thoughts on this game. Overall, it's clearly a better game than the third one. It's kind of hard. Because a lot of the issues of the third game actually started on the second game. The whole gimmicks started in the second game with the quest, so that's already a bad development. The whole, both the quests and the portals, a lot of the problems in the third game started on this game. But as its own, without taking that into consideration, it's a 7 out of 7.5. I'm gonna say a 7.25. That's my compromise there. Because I actually kind of want to make a little bit more of a differentiation between this game and between this game and the first one. And if I gave it a 7.5, I don't think it'll really make a big enough of a difference. 7.25 it is. Mainly because the art style was just terrible to look at. What is this, man? Why would they use Unreal Engine for Spyro? Why? Why in the world would they use that engine, man? I guess everyone uses that engine nowadays, but why? That is just, it has nothing to do with the Spyro aesthetic. Why would you do that? But yeah, well, first game, the one that started everything, that I did not even stream. I don't think I actually, no, I did not stream the first game on this channel, but I did play it, I can assure you of that. First game, yeah, the best of the three. It's, I mean, you could say that it's the most simple out of all of them. You don't have any of the power-ups you have on the second or third game. You don't have any of the special levels or special tasks that you have in the second or third game. Overall, I don't think that's an issue. I think the thing I liked the most about the first game was how effectively they managed to use what they had. The dash mechanic, the fire mechanic, and that's it. That's all you use in the game. And you use it very well. So very efficient, very effective. Because the game never feels boring, despite you only having those mechanics. That's like crazy. I thought that you only have these mechanics when I started the game, and yet I never felt bored in the slightest. It's clearly a masterclass, basically making more with less. And it's a lesson for a lot of games out there, that sometimes you don't really need a lot of mechanics, a lot of load to make a good game. You don't need all that fancy stuff. Sometimes just basic movement and good level design is all you need to make a good game. And speaking of level design, this is clearly by far the Spyro with the best level design out of all of them. The level design in the levels are actually really good. and very conducive to adventure. The levels were not extremely confusing and filled to the brim with stuff of you constantly moving around and around and around, like in the third game. They were also not nearly as simplistic and straightforward as the ones in the second game. They had a good balance of straightforwardness and some more depth to them. You had area, I mean, again, the level itself, the map was very well constructed for the level, and then you felt like you had secondary avenues that you could then go and explore afterwards. It's a bit different from the philosophy of the second game. It's basically a straight line. You don't have secondary avenues. There's no real exploration. You only need to do the quests. So it's basically completely linear. In the second game, it's not like that. You see, the second game, you don't have the main constructed path and then branching paths. Basically, the entire level is one giant path, which makes it feel a little bit convoluted, those levels. You have one giant path where you basically can and should basically do everything. Especially since the secondary paths sometimes are bigger than the main ones, which I don't think that's how you should really make the level. In this one, you basically have the main path. It's not straightforward, you still need to navigate the level a little bit. But then you have some smaller branching paths that you can take, some small deviations here and there that open you up to small little secrets here and there. And I think that's the best way to approach a game like this, in terms of level design. In terms of aesthetics, also the best one, I feel like. It's by far the most memorable in terms of homeworlds. The second homeworld of the second game is very strong as well, but besides that, all of the others are not nearly as memorable. The homeworlds here are all extremely memorable. And I guess, yeah, the homeworlds having enemies does make them more memorable. It forces you to engage constantly. It does end up more in the mind. When you're playing, it does get on your nerves a little bit, but it's definitely a way of making them more memorable, all of them having different enemies. Overall, this game is just good. Yes, I mean, I had an issue with one big issue I had with this game that actually pissed me off a lot was sometimes I was missing one gem and I did not know what it was supposed to be, and I was running across the map over and over and over and over and not being able to find it. Eventually finding it in some random push, but that again, there was like another skill issue from my part, because the game actually gives you a tutorial that tells you that the dragonfly can actually direct you towards any missing gems if you click on L3. And I did not know that, and I just wasted a bunch of time looking for gems, and I could have just used L3. So that's not even a problem here, that's a problem with me. Like some issues with the controls here. I mean, this is the one. The parkour is simple but effective. The boss battles, I think, were very easy. I mean, the bosses would jump, they literally took one hit to kill the bosses, with the exception of Nasty Nora. All of the bosses you fight take one hit to kill, which is pretty fun. It doesn't even feel like a boss, but just a special enemy, really. But actually, no, you actually had levels. Not one hit. I think they actually took 3 hits to kill, which is actually really low compared to later games still. But they never quite felt intimidating. It's like the first boss, the one clan with a cipher, was actually a sheep in disguise. I defeated it without even knowing it was supposed to be a boss fight. That's how weak they were. But again, I still think it's because I mean, Spyro is not even supposed to be a game for, you know, Dark Souls level boss fights. That's not really supposed to be what Spyro is about. It's supposed to be a game for you to sit back, enjoy, relax. And again, everything about the first game is conducive to that. The game design, the level design, everything is. And again, not having very complex interactions, being very simple, not being very bloated, and not having a lot of gimmicks, not having any gimmicks actually. The most gimmick you get is the flying levels. and I think it's just fun overall because of that. It actually has a completely different vibe from the second and third games. Because the second and third games, especially the third one, completely goes against this core concept of Spyro 1 of simplicity. So, yeah, in my opinion, it's the best one, the most memorable, the shortest one as well, which is, again, the shortest one. Once again, you don't need to make a game 50 hours long. Sometimes a short game is just all you need to make a good game. All these modern developers should learn a thing or two. It doesn't insist upon itself, really, if you want to go that way. But yeah, the rest of the game, unfortunate that this game was once again ruined. Enemy variety, I forgot. Enemy variety is good in this game. It's not as extreme as the second one, but enemy variety is still very good in this one. Every new homeworld you go to, the portals actually start getting different enemies, and sometimes even more than that. And unlike in the second game, you don't have as much variety as in the second game, but in this one, the enemies actually feel like they have thought more of them. They're not just furry animals turned into enemies for you. They actually feel like completely different, fantastical and whimsical creatures. They're not just regular animals turned enemies, which again, once again, makes the game more memorable, more fun to play than, you know, just going around beating the animals from a zoo in the second game. I feel like in terms of design, once again, this game just surpasses all the others. But yeah, overall, the main issue with this game is, unfortunately, Unreal Engine. Once again, I don't think it's quite as apparent in this game. I feel like it's not as bad. So, out of the 3 games, I mean, it starts getting better in the second game. The third game, it's horrifically bad. But this one I feel like is the one that got impacted the least, with the Unreal Engine ruining the art style of the game, which again, the art style would make it even more of a whimsical laid-back adventure. The art style change is a problem, and a very serious one in my opinion. And honestly, it's one of the reasons why the games are rated so low. It's because art style change actively hurts these games, because it takes away the essence of the game, what it was supposed to do. Like, not only the original vision, but what the game is supposed to transmit. You're not supposed to go ahead and look at uncanny valley monsters, which look like fairy tale creatures running around in your adventure. Not a disgusting mix, plastic mix of a blob like you see in this game. So it's gonna hurt their ratings a lot. Also the fact that it's a remake. If you're gonna make a remake, which you should not even be making a remake, but you should be making new games, not making remakes. But if you're gonna be making remakes, at least be faithful to the original game in every way, shape and form. Yes, you can expand it a little bit, but be faithful to the aesthetics, to the design, level design, movement, and also try not to rush games out, which the first one doesn't have that issue, but the third one clearly does. I mean, rushing out Beloved and another Beloved game is just disrespectful to the fans, really, and to the original creators. So yeah, this game is gonna get a rating of 8 out of 10, maybe 8.25 out of 10, but I'll keep it 8, slightly above 8. The main problem with this game is, I mean, absolutely the art style. So I guess I'll give it an 8.25 out of 10. I don't want to give it a higher ranking though, because I don't like giving higher rankings to remakes that do stuff like this. I just ignore the original game and just ruin the aesthetics like this. I don't like it, so I don't even want to give it a higher ranking. But this game is actually very fun to play. So yeah, 8.25 out of 10 it is. And I'll say that's about it. This review is done. It took a while of me just rambling about nothing. I guess the real gamers will gain some very profound and insightful information from this game, from this review over here. I'd say I don't know if I'm gonna do any more gameplay streams with voice. Probably not, since I'll get banned very quickly. Because I would just start shouting profanities here whenever I'm having trouble in some random level. So I'm not sure if I really should continue streaming with the mic on, but at the very least, whenever I finish a game, I will try to do a voiced review like this. Hopefully, you did not get dizzy from me constantly spinning around this mountain with Spyro over here. I mean, the controller was on my hand, and it was the only thing that I could use to keep my hands busy while I talk. So, sorry about that. Anyway, if you're a real gamer and you enjoyed this review, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the hell button, all that basic stuff that every YouTuber says nowadays. And be ready for the next gameplay, which I don't even know what I'm gonna play next, but something is gonna be coming out eventually. Okay, have a great one.